And we welcome you back to another edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are brought to you by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Nothing like waking up in the morning to a delicious cup of coffee to get your day started. Myself in the summer heat prefer a good ice cafe cold brew. Thanks to our new coffee sponsor, Fresh Roasted Coffee. You too can enjoy the delicious assortment of flavors Fresh Roasted Coffee has to offer. You can click the link in my show notes. Definitely make sure you put the promo code BYP20. You'll get 20% off your first purchase, and then you can take your little cafe quiz, find out what suits you the best. But they're a great sponsor. We're so happy to have them on board, and we know they're going to carry through the NFL season when the weather gets colder. But it is the dog days of summer. We continue our look around the NFL. With that, we welcome in our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, which you can also hear on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, part of the Coastal Sports Network. Myself, Monday to Friday, 12 to 2, with middays with Q. Give Lloyd a follow at Lloyd Vance on X, myself at Rich Q on Q. And today, my friend, we take a look at the NFC East that hasn't had a back-to-back winner since 01-04 with the Philadelphia Eagles. How are you?
Doing great, Q. Thanks for having me back on. And yeah, excited. This is our home division, and I think there's lots to talk about here. More than the Eagles. And these other three teams are getting better, and it's going to be a fun battle in this division.
Well, you look at Dallas at plus 135, as is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Giants at plus 600 and some change. Washington plus 1,000. Coincidentally enough, when Washington won in 2015 and 2020, they were plus 3,500, plus 2,200. Not bad odds, a little bank in the pocket, so to speak. If you look at right now to win the division, so talking about win totals, which we will get into, you got some high numbers for Dallas and the Eagles. It comes down with Washington. The Giants are kind of buried back there. I'm seeing 6.5. Washington 6.5. Dallas and the Eagles right around 10.5. We'll start with the Philadelphia Eagles minus 120, I should say, to win the division, the plus 135. I'll give you those numbers and what they mean in a moment. But the Philadelphia Eagles minus 120 to win the division. So the Philadelphia Eagles, as it stands right now, the favorite to win the NFC East. They were 10-1 MVP candidate Jalen Hurts. They dropped 6 out of 7. They lost to Tampa Bay. They got rid of the coordinators, but they still have a nice semblance of talent on the offensive and defensive side of the football.
And what's the over number for them, Q?
So they're sitting at 10.5 win total.
All right, so 10.5. When I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, I think they can get to that number, get to that 11-win mark. As you said earlier, no repeat champions since the Eagles in 03 and 04 in this division. Dallas won this division last year. The Eagles, obviously, on paper, are the prohibitive favorites, but a lot of moving parts with this team, as you were talking about in your lead there. Particularly, the coordinators are gone, and they've changed over. Desai and Brian Johnson are gone now. Kellen Moore comes in from the Chargers. Vic Fangio coming over from the Dolphins. And they've been basically tasked with leading their sides of the football. And that's where the questions come in with the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of this season. What is Nick Sirianni doing? He was in charge of the ship last year when they lost 6 of their last 7 games.
Yep.
And really didn't show up against Tampa Bay in the playoffs. So, you wonder about Sirianni and his leadership. Harry Roseman's firmly in the GM seat, so he's not going anywhere. And then in terms of the offense, Jalen Hurts. Last year, he kind of regressed from that 2022 form where he was an MVP candidate last year. He had 23 touchdowns, but he did throw 15 interceptions, a lot of throws into double coverage where you're just kind of shaking your head. They do have A.J. Brown, obviously Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. He's going to lean on them. And your favorite guy now is the Philadelphia Eagle, Saquon Barkley. So a lot of pieces there for this offense. And then defensively, the defense, they retinkered the whole thing, free agency and draft, because they just had so many problems last year.
Still got to figure out how they're going to use Saquon because they underutilized DeAndre Swift. We saw with Sanders too a couple of years ago. It just shows you how you got to catch the futures, right? Because the Philadelphia Eagles opened at plus 110 to win the division. They were at plus 115. Okay. Now they're currently sitting at minus 120. So I'm dropping 120 to win back 100 as opposed to dropping 100 to win 110. I know their schedule, they have a couple quirks. I believe they are a 10, 11 win team. I don't believe they're as good as some people make them out to me. That's a story for another day. The Dallas Cowboys would obviously, odds wise, be the next in line. Now, again, they opened at plus 190. Their low was plus 170. Their last was plus 175. And now the current is plus 190. So they've got the shortest odds as well, along with the Philadelphia Eagles, first and second, respectively, to win the division. A lot of people believe that the Dallas Cowboys, with McCarthy, with Dak Prescott, one season to get it done. They're already eyeing up Sanders coming out of college, maybe Dion, maybe another head coach. Who knows? I feel as though the handwriting's on the wall, and anything less than a trip to the Super Bowl, forget about winning division, forget about winning playoff games, forget about the NFC Championship. If they don't get to the Super Bowl, well, I'm not even going to hedge. Let me just make this statement. If they don't win the Super Bowl, there's no way Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott are coming back.
And the interesting with the Dallas Cowboys, and I talked about this on my show, there are slogans for each team. And the Cowboys slogan basically was, we did nothing, all off season. Other than they brought back Ezekiel Elliott and, Jerry Jones talked big that his was going to be an all-in type of season. Well, he's really kind of stayed on the sidelines in terms of developing this team. So as you're saying, Mike McCarthy, last year of his contract, Dak Prescott, they cannot trade him. They
Nope.
cannot franchise him. He's in the last year of his contract. What do they do with him? With Dak, it's empty calories that I always talk about. He fills up on a lot of bad teams. It puts up big stats. 36 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions last year. Led the NFL in those in touchdown category, but came up short in a playoff game.
Right.
Against the Green Bay Packers, he just looked
Stuck
awful
up
in
the
that
joint.
game. He looked disheveled. And then another guy who's in last year's contract offensively is CD Lamb. He's looking for extension. He's looking at that Justin Jefferson contract, and he wants the same type of money. So, they have CD Lamb that they're trying to work through, and the offense, they do have pieces. Jake Ferguson, I do like him at the tight end position. We'll see what Ezekiel Elliott has left in terms of running the football. They also have Dowdell there as well. So, but this team, a lot of flux, a lot of question marks, and I do agree with you that they're going to kind of take a step back. They are chasing the Philadelphia Eagles, and it may be a tear down situation where they bring in a new coach next season.
I mean, look at the moves that they made in the offseason, right? And their move was Elliott. I mean, what does that kind of tell you? I don't like them to win 10 games. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to be a bad football team. I think they're going to be a bad football team. I think they're in line to maybe win 5 or 6, and that's when I think they blow it up. I don't like the makeup of this team. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't like the makeup of it either, Q. And it's a situation where, they're just kind of stuck in no man's land. Yes, they win about 12 games a season for the last 3 seasons, but they just have not gotten it done in terms of getting over the hump. And uh, the Niners are way ahead of them, and then you got Green Bay Packers coming along. You have the Lions, who everybody is saying, okay, Dan Campbell's kind of turned that franchise around, and then obviously Eagles in their division. So, lots of moving parts for this team. And then I look at the Dallas Cowboys schedule, Q. They have some tough games. Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football in Week 5. Then they turn around and have Detroit in Week 6. They're bye at San Francisco in Week 8. Houston, the Eagles in 10. Week 11, Houston, and then Week 14, Cincinnati on Monday Night Football, and then they close the season. Tampa Bay on Sunday Night Football in Week 16, and the big game against the Eagles in Philadelphia, Week 17. So, a lot of tough games there. And as you said, they just have not done enough. And they have players that are kind of declining. You have Brandon Cooks there, who's getting a little older. Even Zach Martin, they're all pro offensive guard. He's getting older. He's 33, 34 years old. So, you wonder what they're going to be, as you said, by the midseason and then the end of the season.
A Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here, new edition. We are dropping it right now. NFC East in-depth look from an odds perspective. Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Of course, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. You can catch him every Monday, 8. You also hear him on BYP and along with Middays with Q with myself, 12 to 2 on 102.9 FM, The Game, part of the Coastal Sports Network. As we look at the NFCs, we are powered and brought to you by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Check the show notes and the link below. 20% off your first purchase, BYP20. Then you look at the Commanders, longest odds. And again, they opened at plus 900. They're sitting at plus 1100. Listen, we saw last night, the other night on Hard Knocks, Giants pretty much made it evident and clear they would have traded down for Jaden Daniels. Hugo's number 2 to Washington, new head coach, new regime, fan bases, feeling a little alive, a little juice. As I mentioned, when they won in 2015 and won the division, they were plus 3,500. When they won in 2020, they were plus 2,200. Point being is, historically, they have had some really fat, positive plus odds to cash in if, in fact, they won the division. I feel as though they might have a say in the division this year. Now, do I believe they're going to win more than 6.5? If I believe they have a say in the division, I see this team winning 8, 9 games. I think they might have some issues early on, but I do like the makeup of this team. I like the roster. I like the kid Daniels. You bring in a head coach that you think, all right, defensively, we know we can make some adjustments. We're going to try to run the ball. We're going to try to play good run defense. But I would not sleep on the Washington Commanders right now.
Yes, Q, and that 6.5 is very reachable for this team. And they're a team that is trending towards being one of my surprise teams of 2024. And they have a lot of moving pieces with this team. They're bringing Dan Campbell. He's bringing that disciplined style to this team that they greatly needed. Offensively, they're bringing Cliff Kingsbury, who's going to open up the playbook. And then they have Joe Witt running that defense, who has so many first rounders on it. So, obviously the key is going to be Jaden Daniels. I think he really has a very good chance of being this year's Rookie of the Year. We saw what C.J. Stroud did last year, energizing the Texans. Maybe he'll have that kind of effect. He's a guy that's a playmaker, and putting him in this offense, you have Terry McLaurin already there, who's been waiting for a quarterback to help him out. They've cleaned up the offensive line, bringing over the Dallas Cowboys center and Al Grady from the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll see what Zach Ertz has left at the tight end position, and then they have Austin Eckler they brought over at running back too. So some firepower there defensively. As I said, so many former first-round draft picks on that defense. The defense last year was pretty low, though. They were 32nd ranked in terms of points at 30.5, but I think that had a lot to do with the old regime and some of the players that they jettisoned. So I think this team could be one of the surprise teams out there and going to be fun to watch.
And we'll do this on the next couple editions when we start to look at defensive, offensive player of the year, rookie of the years, and whatnot. Just to give you an idea, Jaden Daniels is plus 700 right now for offensive rookie of the year. You would have to imagine if Washington has a good season and they make the playoffs and he puts up monster numbers, then yeah, he is definitely going to be a worthy pick and a worthy play. That leaves us with the New York Football Giants. My Giants, bad football team. We know that. They opened at plus 500. The highest was plus 800. They currently sit, depending upon where you hang your hat, at plus 800. Their win total is 6.5. I think the Giants are in store for a really poor season. It has nothing to do with what we're seeing on Hard Knocks. I told you this a month and a half, 2 months ago. 23, 36, and 1. That's the record of Daniel Jones as a starter for the Giants. 62 touchdowns, 40 picks, inconsistent play, 4 years, $160, has a good season. They win on the road in the playoffs against Minnesota. He comes back, he gets hurt, 4 or 5 games. That's pretty much all she wrote. The fact that Dayball said, hey, yeah, we'll trade down for this kid. It's pretty much, Danny Nichols has to Danny Dime this season. You have no Saquon Barkley, which I'll get into in a moment, but they have the same issues. And I have no problem with the CEO, John Mara, comes out and he's basically talking about what's financially feasible. That's what you should friggin' do as an owner of an NFL team. You don't make decisions based on gut or knee-jerk reactions because it's got to be dollars and cents, right? You're paying a quarterback $160 million. You're not going to hand the friggin' ball off, right? I.e., see a Saquon. But this is a team that they'll win a couple games, maybe split with Washington, have a hard time with Dallas, have a hard time with the Eagles. You might mix in a couple wins here and there, but it's contingent upon the health of Daniel Jones. Right now they're going to stack the box. We're going to dare you to throw it, test those young receivers, whether it's Robinson, Hyatt, Neighbors, whatever, get the tight end in the mix. The defense still worries me a little bit. I know they made the trade for Burns. I know, again, Sexy Dexy. I know they got Thibodeau. Secondary, some issues. I just don't. I'm so petrified that, first of all, I don't believe Daniel Jones is going to be ready for the season. And if he's not, you got to turn to Drew Lock, right? I'm just so petrified this kid's going to drop back to pass and take a shot, and that's going to be it. And I'm not even talking about the knee. I'm talking about the neck. I do not believe they are a 6.5, 7 win team. It pays me to say that, being a Giant fan, but I have to be objective and realistic. I see they're staring down the barrel of 4-13. And tell you what, if it gets ugly like it did with Shermer, like it did with McAdoo, like it did with Judge, you might see Shane and you might see Brian Daboll out in New York. And it's very rare because now you're talking about a franchise that's made a lot of head coaching changes over the last decade.
Yes, Q. And I tend to agree with you. You know, at 6.5 wins, I just don't think the New York Giants are going to reach that. And on my show, we were just talking about like one big question for each team. And the big question with the Giants is, will Brian Daboll survive this season? There's just so much swirling around his team, as you just pointed out. And he is a very good coach, and it would be precipitous fall from coach of the year to being let go. So
Did you
we're going to have to
caveat that
monitor
question,
that.
by the way? Did you have a caveat with that? Like, if Daniel Jones plays well and puts up
Mhm.
numbers and he's healthy, and the defense blows 5 games in the fourth quarter and they only win 6 or 7, is that where you're saying, all right, does he survive? Or if Jones gets hurt, or if Jones struggles mightily and they're 1-5, 2-7, 2-6, they're giving up points, they're losing 35-3. Did you hedge it a little bit? Like, what needs to
Right.
happen for Brian Daboll to get run out of town?
Sure. I put some context definitely around that because this team, a big thing is the roster. When I look at it, I don't see a lot of talent in terms of the offensive side of the football. And last year they only scored 15.6 points per game, and you just wonder where they're going to get this explosiveness from. Yes, Malik Neighbors was a very good pick coming over to the receiver position. He's going to have a big adjustment, though, because NFL coverages are a lot different, even than the SEC. But Daniel Jones obviously is the big question mark. Much like you, I'm hearing that ACL may not be ready for him to be ready to start the season, and then where do they go from there? Even if he does play, last year he had 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions before he got hurt. So he is a big question mark, as you said. It's like they gave him that money, and it's like, man, should they have given him broken the bank for him? But they did, and now they got to live with it. They continue to try to fix that offensive line. This year they brought in John Runyon, and they also brought in a tackle over from the Raiders, and we'll see what Devin Singletary what he has in terms of replacing Saquon. Defensively, obviously, Brian Burns was a big get for him. Putting him next to Dex Lawrence is going to help them out. They do have some pieces defensively. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, I just think it's going to be a tough year for them. And you're right. It depends how they lose that many games. And there's always a story behind the season. And maybe the Mara family say, you know what, Bayball is a good coach. Let's tear this down, keep him around. Joe Shane, from everything I've watched in Hard Knocks, they believe in him as well, and people that I've talked to. So, right now, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out, but I just don't see it being a good season for the Giants.
Would would you agree that the reason Giant fans just cannot let go of this obsession with Saquon Barkley, and I'll say it again, I said it on Middays with Q earlier today on 1029 FM, the game, Coastal Sports Network. He's overrated. Like, I'm not saying he's not a great back, but you can still be overrated. He had 3 really good years. The first 2 of his career were great, historic, if you will, that one year. But then he's always been injured. He comes off the field. He's really hasn't improved that much as a running back that can pick up the block, pick up the blitz, right? Catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a great talent, but he's injury prone. And the only reason that Giant fans are so obsessed and pissed off is not because he's not with them anymore. It's because he signed with the Eagles. I mean, that's really it. If Saquon Barkley signed with the Carolina Panthers or the Tennessee Titans, does a Giant fan really care? I mean, seriously.
I think also another over is he was overdrafted too, Q.
Of course he
He's what,
was.
second
It was a
overall pick
reach.
when he's taken. Yeah, so taking a running back in today's NFL, that's just like you don't do that. You know what I
No.
mean? That's where you take a quarterback. So he had the bullseye on his back then, and then I look at his numbers from last year: 14 games, 962 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. You know, he didn't even get 1,000 yards. You know what I mean?
In today's NFL,
And
even behind a shitty offensive line, you should be able to get 1,000 yards
right.
in an NFL season. It's not 1,000 yards, by the way. If you do the math, right, you're talking 60 yards a game.
And
60
everybody's
yards a
going to,
game in
yeah,
17 games gets you over 1,000. He should
right.
be
And
a
everybody's
15.
going to point to the offensive
I
line
don't
and
I
this
don't
and
want to hear
that.
that anymore,
There's a
man.
lot of excuses. And you
Create
know
your
what?
own
I think
holes.
some fans are butthurt by him going to the Eagles, as you're
Oh,
saying.
I think that's
But you
exactly
know
what
what?
it is. I think that's exactly
In
you.
today's NFL,
Yeah,
and just not to cut you off, but
yeah,
today's NFL, paying a 27-year-old running back
ludicrous.
what $14 million a season? That's just no. That's not the way the game is played today. And they can move that money around to other positions. We'll
I'm
see what
telling you, it's because he signed
Singletary
with the
has.
Eagles. It's because he
And
signed
yeah,
with.
I
It's
think it is.
because he signed with the Eagles. That's it. Period. I don't care. I'm sitting there. They're talking about now. Everyone's they're hemming and hawing in the age, and now they're talking about tampering, which maybe is the case, but we've seen in the NFL. Who cares? I mean, I just enough with the obsession. It was just like Beckham, and Beckham now has turned into a journeyman friggin' wide receiver in the NFL. How are you going to dispute that?
Right. And you can't, too often fans get enamored and they just can't move past players. And in today's NFL, it's just so rare where somebody stays with their team their entire career. And look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady, he won all those Super Bowls for the Patriots. And, after a while, he had an expiration label with them. So, the Giants made a business decision. And as I said, at that age and how much roster cap space he's going to take up, you just couldn't do it, and they had to move in another direction. Now, we'll see if they made the right decision. But as you said, with the Eagles, we were talking about them earlier. The Eagles kind of they like getting a shiny new toy, and then sometimes they don't use them. Look at DeAndre Swift last year. You thought he'd have that breakout season for them, and there were so many games where he disappeared. So, you
100%.
know, it's going to be up to Kellen Moore and Sirianni to get him involved in the Eagles offense. But um, the Giants, obviously, their fans are going to point to week 7. That that's the home game against the
Let a
Eagles.
point, man.
And then at the end of the season, it's in Philadelphia week 18. So
Well, so what
those
if he
weeks
has
are circled.
150? He has 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Who cares? They were not going to pay him. They wanted to move on. They had other pressing needs. And let's be honest, they locked up that money in a quarterback that wound up getting hurt. Not to mention a horrible contract, keeping Shepard around, Kenny Galladay. The list goes on and on and on and on. So, like, who run for 150? Have at it.
And I lived this out here in Philadelphia with Donovan McNabb. They got rid of him, and I heard some people say they're going to ruin the day. They got rid of him and everything. Well, he came back. I covered that game. He won one game, 13
That's
to
it.
7,
And he was horrible.
and then and he didn't even really win the game. I think it was the defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown. And then he didn't do anything the rest of his
Yeah.
time with Washington and then in Minnesota. So it just shows you, you know, at a certain point you got to move on. And players, they're right at a certain time, but then other times it's time for them to go and then you move
Yeah.
on.
I don't even think he cracked 80 yards in that game. And I think his comment was, who made the mistake now? I was like, shut up, Donovan. Seriously, I don't need to need to hear this nonsense. Lloyd Vance, you can catch him every Monday night. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, 8 to 9 on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game joins us on BYP as we break down the NFL. Will join us during the week as well on Middays with Q from 12 to 2 on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game. And as always, we're powered by Fresh Roasted Coffee. Check out the show notes, 20% off your first order, BYP 20. And with that, a look at the NFC East. I think we can all agree Washington potentially the sleeper, Giants in the basement, Dallas in trouble. Watch Philadelphia Eagles division to win.
I think that's the way it stacks up, and maybe we'll get two teams out of this division. We'll see, but some of the other divisions, Q, are just in the NFC are stacked. I really like that NFC North, and
Yep.
they have some quality teams in that division.
It's gonna NFC is gonna be tough. I mean, you like we talked about, you got 5 or 6 really good teams out of the conference, and you have 2 or 3 really great teams, and we'll see how it shakes out. Later on in the week, we'll hit it again. We'll go around the league, some news and notes as well, and then we'll start to dive into as we cleared out all the divisions, some storylines that maybe you and I want to kind of just debate and analyze and dissect, and then we'll look at the futures market when it comes to some of these awards. Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, MVP. So I'll have a little fun with that. But as always, I appreciate a couple moments, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.